Salutations everyone. Welcome to whom it may concern to this particular new video unraveling the light in today's new chapter of life. And for those of you, always keep it mental. I basically wanted to conduct this video to conjuring this inspiration deriving of how I have dealt in the speciality of specific cards since of ancientness of forever that I've always seemed to have conflicted in between with, and all throughout my entire duration of life I had collided or conflicted with this particular interest of human nature. It's not so much of a delving interest, it's more of a great deal of annoyance to a degree. However, I find in our nature and any type of nature being fascinating ultimately. So this video has sparked a particular interest of mine, considering that your words literally fall upon deaf ears however much you say so, and this video will have layered the borderline of misconceptions, of confusions, replacing our blindfolds of ignorance and blatant disregard and disrespect within the psychological, psychosis of how that sustainability of pushing against the inertia of our psychological humanistic minds with reasoning, ethics of values, of principles of morality, and ultimately a conveying of how oneself could value the deeper principles and morality of open-mindedness and tolerance and diversity, and of how we could, as a collective humanity, benefit and derive a positive energy from one another. The lessons that are appeared or learned from who and what we are, who we once were to who we have become to who we will have become. And it's everything that's embodied or described within the documents of my books. And this is ultimately a clarification or confirmation, clarifying of how we should focus a lot less towards being judgmental towards each other as a society, and focus more upon the light of how we could derive that benefit of positive intentions from one another as a humanity. And so little do we have this value of understanding of how to greater ourselves, to sink deeper into the collectivism of our consciousness and our minds. And one thing I've always pointed out, a specific good point, was that for those who judge me, reveals and decodes the self-titlement of ignorance, of how little and finite they understand oneself or of another person, or specifically myself in this regards. And you find so much that, like, take from my example, since I was a small infant and before that, I've had this somehow lodged deeper sense of ability to understanding of how different I was from everyone else. How ultimately, throughout the progression and the inclining of my years of breathing upon this particular planet, yes, indeed, yes, there are multiple planets. They're not just one singular secular planet that the majority of mankind has a tendency to believe. And the narcissism of their blatant disregards of stupidity, and I get that in a moment. I've always had this sense of realism that I was always different than everyone else. I've always had this reality of understanding of how being an outsider, I've sensed that I was not inevitably not like everyone else, and for that consequence, I always found myself discovered to being an outsider and treated as such. And for this particular reason, it's certainly through the victim of abuse, by means of a lot of different means, it had helped me to become stronger throughout the experience of my life of breathing that particular isolationism. And it revealed to me of how the ancientness of my past life, realizing it much deeper now compared to before, the soul crafting of my purpose, and sinking deeper beneath the lodge that's placed inside of the eyes of my heart and my hands, that it's drawn me somehow much closer to the divine creator, to God, to the light and the providence of that divination. And myself now, I've never realized it before until as of recent, that being a hoodoo practitioner, a practitioner of white and black alchemy of magic, and a shamanic practitioner, being a spiritualist, a theosophist, and to name a few, a misanthropic nihilist. As a realist and a perfectionist, as a philosopher, as a visionary, as an author, as a video content creator, I seem to have realized so many different perspectives of many different things, and everything seems to unravel itself in the genetics of our nature and of our purpose, of our legacy, whilst developing that legacy and becoming who you are and who you're meant to become. As I do not believe in coincidence or fate or destiny. You create your future of how you desire to see it, to become the materialization and unraveling, to manifesting that into reality. And so many people, they're so very intimidated by me. They cannot understand what I represent, who I am, who I once were, or who I will have become. And this is another blatant disregard of positive changes, that betterment towards that traveling of eastward towards light. Is how so many have this sexual fixation of how to fantasize someone else in such a regard that they are intimidated by what they cannot, and fear of what they cannot or do not or never, perhaps will never understand. And rather they always place a sword of judgment to cut the flesh upon your hands. And they never take this incentive or intention or this incline to, or this positive incline towards getting to know someone else or myself as a human being, and to instead to share that mortality between each other and the covalent bonds of our relationships. We find ourselves stuck inside of this collective coexistence of this inertia. It's like a solar opposite for a magnet that constantly pushes against each other while you're attempting to doing so. It just pulls itself apart naturally. The covalent ions of positive and negative. And so many people have this misconception that I'm somehow part of light. And the truth being is, I've said this numerous times before, I do not personally believe in positive and negative. Certainly are positive and negative when it comes to magnetic fields and electromagnetic pulse and different scientific projects here and there, but as far as like negative and positive and human nature is, honest to God, those are meaning the absence of colors. Those are the definitions of what humanity lacks. It's like politics. The Republican and Democratic Party, there's no such existence. There's only this embodying of our natural born sins and our human nature, which is, I suppose like good and evil. The absence of colors have no representation as myself. I'm neither light nor darkness. I'm just this shadow that wanders in between the valleys of the center, the alignment of his craft in between. And I cannot put a label on it. I cannot put, a definition of words into it. And your spoken tongue has so much power of emphasis, of authority, and what you put into the universe is what you get out of it. And to simply put words and try to put human meaning into it is absolutely disgusting and degrading. To describe the light, to describe darkness. Darkness is in itself the absence of colorations. It often represents emptiness. It often represents a body or systematic approaches of evil. However, I find it to be a lesson learned. This particular lesson is the gracious manifestation of how emptiness is actually a place of meditation and comfort. A place where, although isolating, although blinding, as is light, light is also blinding. So how could you actually put into words of what side is blinding? Much like the political spectrum. Without having discussions of politics, I absolutely despise it with a passion. I think as a misanthropic nihilist, I believe that so much is corrupted in our society today. And a specific reason of why I am a misanthropic nihilist, man, woman, child, I equally share a misanthropic resentment towards all of human life. And there are only a small finite fraction of a percentage of a few I could count upon my fingers or the fingers invisible inside of my thoughts, and a conscious collectivism of how this realization embodies a full circle of how a majority of people, simply to put, and no disrespect, no offense, and they cannot be trusted. And I have learned that lesson, and I've repeated its reincarnation of that particular value and all throughout my life. When someone as myself attempts to publishing books, to creating videos, and honest to God, no one pays my bills for me. I know that's like a generic statement. I'm sure everybody said, nobody pays my bills, No, nobody does. And I swear to God, because that's the reality, that's the facade of, that is the underlining, the silver tone of truth. And not once did anyone that I could ever think of, no one comes to mind, when I have to put the placement of my books into every single shop within a duration of a month and a half or 2 months now, in 40 different shops. And that is all derived from myself. Bambuka never helped. The majority of anyone else never helped. Except numero uno, number one, that's me. I had to do it. Because in the lessons of truth ultimately is that you cannot depend on anyone else with the exception of your own independent self. The independent nature of your aspirations, your passion and fire, allow it to manifest and materialize in itself. See, the values of the world is that the truth of our human nature is that the world does not intend or have that particular desire to see you succeed. They do not wish to see you become better than yourself. They do not wish to see you reach greatness and reach the blinding light. And I had to chase after my own shadows, so to speak. I am the one who holds this desire to chase the light. And how I have manifested this intention to better myself, to become an entrepreneur. And it's like I said before, the purpose of my books is not for the sake of public relations, narcissism, or glory, popularity, or what have you. It's a livelihood. It's a way that, I've materialized our future career together, and it delves into the deeper realms of mysteries of this non-fiction autobiography, traveling within my infinite journey of spirituality and my philosophical idealisms, rising from nothingness to greatness, from darkness to light, and traveling throughout the core and foundations of astral traveling. Being a shamanic practitioner, this is our purpose, to heal the wounds of the world, of mankind. And I find that often difficult being a misanthropic, however. I want to reveal to the world the mortality and morality of that infusion of darkness and light. Therefore, you could see universes and worlds from different angles of perspective, perceptions, ideologies, philosophies. And in the end, it does not matter what side you represent. Spirituality is spirituality regardless of how you look at it. And this coexistence is what we promote and practice and teach and advocate every single day of our life. The consciousness revolution of awakening is what we intend to teach the world. For those who are actually willing to open their eyes, their hearts, and their minds to it. I released this book as a way that in itself, even towards the credit of the end of the book, I mention of how this book, in particular, Shape-Shifting the Oral Worlds of Astral Projection, is actually devoted to everyone who never had and never will have believed in me, in my aspirations. And as for those judgmental minds, as I'm creating this video for those who are the particular target audience for, to have this blatant disregard of ignorance towards judgment and of judgment upon themselves, towards each other, and towards me personally. And it's so easy for someone to judge others. And before you judge me or others, you should take a look at yourself in the mirror and perhaps try to work on your own imperfection, your own sins, and pray to God you find salvation and redemption in that forgiveness. As God knows, I pray every day for the betterment towards a positive incline, a gradual progression of humanity. And by the looks of it, it seems like what everyone wants to do is work this 9-to-5 job, enslave yourself to the system instead of working with the system. And you rather, as a humanity, they rather struggle to strive to thrive towards betterment. But how do you expect yourself to strive towards betterment when you have nothing to have a platform to strive towards? Or when you are so indifferent towards each other or towards someone as myself, again, the positive good nature of our intentions, and you cannot see the wool that's placed over your own eyes, this somehow matrix deception of reality that you somehow confide and coexist collectively within. For one thing, I cannot stand human nature for a lot of obvious reasons. Sometimes it just annoys me, sometimes it fascinates me, and sometimes it just disappoints me, so much so that I have a tendency to lash out at people. My anger, my resentment, my vileness, it just somehow gets the best of me, and therefore I seem to take it out on others. Unapologetic, however, sometimes the truth has a consciousness awakening that stains the minds of people, and that they need this reality to pull themselves out of this inertia or this state of apathetic indifference of this state of mind. And I somehow think that silence is worse than violence and war and poverty, which it absolutely is. I absolutely agree. Realists and perfectionists as myself, we are somehow have a smeared campaign to being mislabeled, misjudged, misconceived, and misplaced, and disregarded in humanity as painted villains. While I care nothing on the behalf of judgments derived from others, it actually makes me personally stronger. And I consider every day to being alive and breathing truly an infinite blessing. I find it a remarkable sensationalism of the purpose why I'm alive for, so I can consciously awaken somehow the facades of people's minds. For those who are open-minded, willing to listen anyways. So. Otherwise, as a light worker, starseed, an ancient being as myself, deriving from the ancientness of past, the ancestries are often disappointed in the realms of humanity, which is why the purpose I was born. As a starseed light worker, everything that I do, I struggle to try to see this adorable balance, this attractive balance of humanity, and it's like, a lot of people rather play video games or indulge and delve themselves in the selfishness of their time invested in materialism and in irrelevancies and insignificance. As such, they delve themselves in drama of other people's lives and their affairs and their business. And rather than to work on themselves. They'd rather just focus outwards instead of internally. And they focus on, what's on Facebook, or the latest football game, or the latest video game that had come out. Or let's go bar hopping for a little while. Well, here's the door. Get the fuck out. Won't let the door hit you in the ass. That's one thing that frustrates the piss out of me, is that rather, instead of preserving our planet and the sacred oneness of our Mother Earth and our planet, we'd rather be occupied and be doing Comic-Cons or what have you, or whatever people want to fascinate themselves in the injection of their time. What about let's help each other as a collective community? Because that's what I've been doing with my books. Every time I get my books accepted into a shop in particular, those shop owners, I help them as they help me. I am helping them by helping promote their business, and they're helping me. Well, obviously, You're not a child. I do not need to explain the circumferences of this algorithm, this hypothesis. So, I actually bring it upon myself to travel around the state, to travel everywhere, in the sake of helping small mom and pop businesses, the entrepreneurs as such myself. We are all struggling inside of this world, and we need to collectively join in our hands together, not divide and conquer ourselves and between one another. Let's help to get more our path into spiritualism. Let's get ourselves more involved in a community. Let's help ourselves, help each other and ourselves. Namaste.